What a matchup!
And what a team, Mike. Metro PCS and the iPhone SE for $0 on a network that covers 99% of people in the U.S. Oh, impressive.
Play with the best. Switch to Metro PCS on an unlimited LTE plan and get a 32-gig iPhone SE for $0. Metro PCS. Coverage not available in some areas, plus sales tax. Claim based on talk and text. Not valid for active numbers currently on the T-Mobile network or active on Metro PCS in the past 90 days. See store for details and terms and conditions.
Blog Talk Radio. Welcome to Nonprofit U, a forum where nonprofit stakeholders can share lessons learned and discuss the latest developments in the industry. My name is Valerie, Leonard, your host. I'm a consultant to nonprofits, and I specialize in community and organizational development. I work with nonprofit organizations to help them make a stronger impact on the community. Find Nonprofit U on Facebook and Twitter. I encourage you to follow us and to comment early and often using the hashtags NonprofitU, Peter Gariepy, and Who Among Giants. You can also leave comments on blogtalkradio.com/nonprofit_U. The chat room is open and you can post comments and questions. In order to use the chat room, you must open a listener-only account. You'll find a link to open the account on the page for this episode right up under the chat box. In fact, you can also email me questions at consulting@valerieofleonard.com. And we'll be taking questions by phone and from our chat room at about the 30-minute mark or so. The call-in number is 347-884-8121. And remember, if you're participating in the chat room, you don't necessarily have to wait for a half hour. You can start posting now if you'd like. Today's topic is Who Among Giants? We have a lot to talk about today, including Peter's experience in economic development and social enterprises, as well as his run for Cook County Treasurer and his new book, Who Among Giants. Again, we encourage you to call in with questions at about the 30-minute mark. You can start posting in the chat room right now if you'd like, and you can email me questions at consulting@valerieofleonard.com. If you want to participate in a live chat, you must open a listener-only account, and the link is found on the episode page right beneath the chat box. Again, the call-in number is 347-884-8121. Again, 347-884-8121. Nonprofit and community development professionals, as well as policymakers, are especially encouraged to call in and share your stories, strategies, and comments. Today's guest is Peter Gariepy. He's a principal with Vora Certified Public Accountants, and he's also a candidate for the Cook County Treasurer's Office. Vora is the first CPA firm in the Midwest to become a certified benefit corporation, meaning that the firm seeks to generate a positive social and environmental impact through serving their clients. Peter volunteers as the treasurer of the West Town Special Service area, and I'd like to mention he's also a community resident, so he's one who lives in the community where he is a principal in a business. And he has in the past served on the auxiliary board of Christ the King Jesuit College Prep School in Chicago's Austin neighborhood. Okay, so I want to thank you so much for being a guest, Peter. It's indeed an honor. Yes, sir.
Oh, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
No, not a problem. I'm really honored to have you, someone with your background and being so young. You've done a whole lot in your young life.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that very much.
Mm-hmm. So you're a principal with Vora Certified Public Accountants, and that's the first CPA firm in the Midwest to become a certified benefit corporation. As such, the firm seeks to generate a positive social and environmental impact through serving your clients. So before we get started, what is a certified benefit corporation?
Sure. So a certified benefit corporation, often shortened to a B Corp, is a for-profit company who then, through its operations, seeks to generate a positive social and or environmental impact, which is a long way of saying, whether you manufacture something or you provide goods or you provide services, that through that, can you do so in a way that also generates maybe a public good by donating time or by donating services or goods, by procuring your materials or your services in a responsible way, by making sure that you pay a living wage, that you offer health benefits, that you, that basically you do more than just the minimum of a business, that you seek to operate in a way that is not only aspirational, but in many ways increasingly responsible.
Okay, great. So how is this different from an L3C?
Sure. So an L3C is a legal designation, a certified benefit corporation. It is a third-party certification that carries, at least in the case of our business, carries no legal difference for us.
I gotcha.
And the company or the entity that administers this is a third party called B Labs or Benefit Labs. And just to give a little bit of background, a while ago there was an athletic wear brand called And1. And the founders of the company, they treated their employees in a certain way, and they operated in a certain way, and they acquired their raw materials in a certain way, and they then sold that company off. And once they sold it, they were not happy with the way that the new owners were treating the employees and were making the products, and they just felt that it was sort of a betrayal to the high standards they had set. And after seeing that, they were bothered and they wanted to do something. So if they ever created another company and ownership changed hands, there would be legally enforceable standards in place. So while an L3C has to do with the company's structure, a benefit corporation amends the company's articles of organization or its operating agreement to say that we will be donating a certain percentage of our profit to an environmental cause, or we will pay employees a certain amount, or we will, procure in a way that might cost a little bit extra, but that we feel is responsible. And by then amending the company's documents, should ownership change hands, the idea is that those sort of higher and better commitments would be memorialized and remain in place.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much, because, they're both, I guess, forms of social enterprise, and, I'm still trying to get my head, wrapped around this. It's new to me, and, I really appreciate your making that distinction.
Absolutely, yeah, and I believe L3C, it's just short for Low Profit Limited Liability Company.
Okay.
So if that helps. But no, yeah, we are not an L3C.
Okay, great. So you didn't have to restructure your organization. You just had to adhere to a certain standards. And from time to time, do you need to go through a review process or some sort of reporting process to make sure that you remain in compliance?
Yes, and then they will have occasional audits to simply say, okay, can you send us some supporting documentation on this? We just want to check. So it's a little bit different for us being a service provider, since we don't make anything. We provide we provide tax and accounting services to our business clients and our personal clients. So the way in which we provide those services is how they measure our our benefit. But some of the most well-known benefit corporations in Chicago is likely Method Soap Corporation, or the Method Soap Company, which has their plant down in Pullman. And being a manufacturer, the way that they acquire their materials, process them, ship them, all of those things, they've really been they've been a leader, particularly a local leader, for how a company can follow those principles and do rather well.
Okay, great. I'm going to have to study them.
Yeah, they're a very neat one. They have their products all over the place.
Okay, so when I think about a social enterprise, that is a for-profit company that uses market-driven approaches to solve society's greatest problems, like employment, right? I never, ever in my wildest imagination would think of a CPA firm, as being a social enterprise. So can you share some of the ways Vora fulfills its social mission?
Sure. Sorry, would you mind repeating the question? It just broke up a little bit there at the end.
Okay, yeah, I am so sorry. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, when I think about a social enterprise, the last thing that comes to my mind is an accounting firm, because I always think of you guys as players in making sure folks comply, right? So Vora is a social enterprise in that you're a certified B Corp. So what are some of the ways that Vora fulfills its social mission?
Sure. So you'd be surprised in some of the ways how we do it, because as what I consider us to be an evolving firm. So the accounting industry is going through really an exciting time in transformation with the emergence of cloud-based technology that allows us to retrieve client records far more regularly and dependably than in the past. So it's not as much. So as we move more and more to that, we kind of go through less of those traditional office supplies, but it's even through the acquisition of office supplies, of paper, of equipment, of things like that, that a company begins to measure their benefit. So one of the ways that the B Corp process does is to make sure that you are using local suppliers. So in in every case possible, whether it's where we acquire our paper from, or where we get other supplies, we always try to make sure we do go through local suppliers, because even if we can't double our payroll, at least hopefully we can help those who are our neighbors. Even if they're not across the street, they are certainly within the same metropolitan area. So with things like that, by patronizing other benefit corporations whenever possible, so even for office supplies like soap, like we use Method hand soap here. So we try to patronize, we do our best to patronize those fellow B Corps who have committed to trying to do more than just turn a profit, but to do so in a way that also generates an additional impact. So even in some of those cases, if we are not able to generate that impact directly, we want to make sure we are supporting those who are.
Okay, great. So is there a list? Is there some website we can go to get a list of B Corps or social enterprises in Chicago?
Yes, absolutely. I think it is. I think if you go to www.bcorporation.net, within there they have kind of a whole story. They have a directory, which is very helpful because they're always updating it. And, if a need comes up, where you need to make an acquisition that you normally haven't done in the past, and sometimes where we have to refer work if someone comes to us and it's work that we're not able to take on at that time, I'll always make sure that I try to refer it first to a fellow B Corp, or if we need to look for legal support, are there any other B Corp attorneys in the area? Let's give them a call first. So it's very helpful to have that directory as kind of a first stop, before just Googling something.
Okay, great. I'm going to make sure, after you and I get off the podcast, that I add a link to www.bcorporation.net. I'm going to add that in the comments section, so anyone who listens to this archive podcast will, in fact, be able to click onto that link and do further research.
Okay. Sounds good.
Alrighty, so you're currently the treasurer of the West Town Special Service Area, or SSA. So before we talk about that, can you tell us what an SSA is?
Sure. So an SSA, or Special Service Area, it is a designated area through which the commercial corridors in that area take an increment of taxpayer dollars and use it for locally driven purposes advised on by a board of commissioners, a board of volunteer commissioners for that SSA. So, for example, within West Town here, you would see the regular garbage cans that are serviced by the City of Chicago's Streets and Sanitation Department. And then there are these bright-colored orange garbage cans, which the West Town SSA administers. And so the idea just being that the city provides a certain standard of services, and then in the interest of encouraging commercial activity down certain corridors within the SSA's boundaries, the volunteer commissioners will then decide how that money should be best used, and that can be, things for public art projects, for additional garbage cans, for clearing snow off the sidewalks during the winter, for holiday decorations, things that are there to help encourage additional economic activity within the SSA's boundaries.
Okay, so is there an additional tax that must be paid if you live with, or not live within the district, but if you operate a business within the district?
Yes, so there is an additional tax, and that brings up a very interesting point with SSAs and sort of other tax increment programs where most taxpayers I think do not know that an SSA exists. Most taxpayers don't know if they're within a TIF district. And so the amount of money that the SSA gets, their purpose is to spend it in a responsible way to try and improve the commercial corridors and thus economic activity within the area. But you come back to it and you start to wonder, is this the highest and best use for these dollars? So don't get me wrong. I enjoy having, the holiday decorations are nice, and the additional trash cans certainly help keep the area cleaner. But is that the best place for those tax dollars to go? Should they be going, so in this area, the 13th Police District was closed. And now the 12th Police District, which I live in and where my office is, I believe is the largest police district in terms of population that the city covers, which wasn't the case before the 13th District was closed. So that's the thing. I mean, does the existence of the SSA preclude the reopening of that police district? No, it's not that much money. But does the fact that things like that exist, should it be put towards another effort? So that's sort of a larger conversation, but one that I think about a great deal when it comes to TIF districts, to SSAs. Are they more nice to haves than need to haves? And that's something, and I've really valued my time as a volunteer commissioner and as the treasurer of the West Town SSA because I get to see, and and all of this money is spent in a very thoughtful and judicious manner, and it's allocated to each SSA. There's a large number. There's a number of them around the city, but still, is that the most deserving place for these taxpayer dollars? And that's a far larger conversation.
Right, which brings me to another point. From your vantage point, you've gained some very interesting insights, as to how our local property taxes can be used to jumpstart local economies, and the SSA is one of them. But what do you see as some of the strengths and limitations? And I think you started that already with the SSAs as they're currently structured.
Sure. So I think one of the strong parts with an SSA as it currently exists is that idea of local control. And I come back to the idea of participatory budgeting, which I know has been, so Alderman Joe Moore, who's up in the 49th Ward in Rogers Park, I know he was one of the pioneers of that. Alderman Carlos Rosa in 35, upon his election, has done a great deal with that as well. And so the idea that those who are paying into the taxes, that they have a voice in how that money is used. So in those programs, kind of the aldermanic menu money, it might be to redo a park, put in a play structure, maybe fix a certain community amenity that was not scheduled to be fixed for a while. But with SSAs, I don't think through any fault of the SSAs, there's just not that level of interest or involvement from the local community. I think in many cases, most people think it's just the city doing it, as opposed to taxpayer dollars funding a volunteer-driven effort to provide more targeted services. So that's the thing. I mean, if you didn't have holiday decorations, does it mean that people are not going to shop in your area for the month of December? Of course not. Does it help add to the festive nature? Sure. But how important is that when there are certainly more pressing financial needs that those taxpayer dollars could be going towards? So I think that's one of the big things with the SSAs, that you have local volunteer community members directing them to issues that given what the SSA can do, what they feel are important. But still, I mean, it's not within the SSA's power to say, okay, we're going to make sure that we now start to fund the extracurricular activities at a local high school that had them cut several years ago. So, however, is that a higher and better use for those funds? And I think that's certainly a valid conversation, and not one that is that blames the SSAs because they didn't create themselves, but one that is worth having, particularly as we do have some lean budget times that we're in, and I'm confident remain ahead of us.
Yes. Okay, so I want to remind our listening audience that you're listening to Nonprofit U, and we're speaking with Peter Gariepy. Peter is the principal with Vora Certified Public Accountants, and he's also a candidate for Cook County Treasurer. We'll be taking questions from our listening audience very shortly, in about 8 minutes. And if you have any questions you'd like to send, please feel free to do so. If you want to call in, the call-in number is 347-884-8121. Again, that number is 347-884-8121. So, Peter, in Cook County, the assessor is responsible for administering programs that reduce the tax burden as an incentive for companies that create jobs in communities where, but for the incentives, the companies would not invest. So this includes programs like tax increment financing programs, or TIF, the 6B and 7A program, and that whole family of programs. In many, but not all cases, these programs don't have the intended consequence of creating jobs for the local residents of the community while reducing tax revenues to the county and local government. So, for example, in North Lawndale, we have documented that only about 3% are actually directly impacting local residents. And then for me personally, I've read of cases where companies have gotten tax breaks through the 6B program, promising to bring jobs. And the tax breaks kick in pretty early. You know, they kick in when the projects are 50% occupied versus when the jobs are created. So some of these buildings are built on spec and are near empty, just standing there in the community. And I'm just thinking, you know, the treasurer's job is focusing obviously on revenues, while the assessor's office is, you know, focusing on assessing property values and providing the incentives. So what are some of the ways that you can think of that the treasurer's office can work with the assessor's office to strengthen the programs in such a way that over the long term, they actually do produce more revenue that can then be reinvested into the communities for which they're intended to jumpstart?
Sure. Well, you bring up a fantastic point with that, which is that a number of these tax breaks, they do not yield the benefits that they exist to create. One of the first things I would want to do as treasurer, and this is something that I believe in wholeheartedly, which is you do not need a background in tax or law or municipal finance or any of that to understand how you are served and how your priorities are served by your tax dollars. And one thing I would want to make sure, because right now, for example, if you do not live in a TIF district, well, your taxes are higher because TIFs exist. So I believe in the city of Chicago, as recently as 2016, TIFs brought in about $561 million. So that means that the other taxpayers within the city of Chicago had to cover that amount. Now, that is not the fault of those people who live in TIF districts, but when that happens, you should be able to see, okay, even if I don't live in a TIF, what is this money going to? Now, okay, the money is supposed to be going to creating jobs, or it's supposed to be going to whatever the purpose of that TIF is. Now, is it then generating what it is supposed to do? TIFs, their initial life is, what is it? I believe 23 years. 23 years. And then they can be, 23 years, and then they can easily be extended for an additional 12. So TIFs can have a 35-year life before they even generate the benefit that they should. Now, I think that's something where taxpayers, for everything, whether it is for your child's school, for the TIF district you do or do not live in but are helping to fund, or are underwriting if you do not live in that TIF district, or in these cases, you know, a 6B property tax incentive or a Class 7 or a Class 7A or 7B tax incentive, it should be clear as day on an online itemized taxpayer receipt how much of your money went to fund each of these initiatives and what did you get for your money? How many jobs were created? Should a different program be in place where maybe they don't get a break on property taxes? Maybe we work with the state to say, look, once they create these jobs, they'll get a break on employer taxes. And that's where the incentive is. But you have to create these jobs first because of, you know, what has happened in the past where we have not had the intended production that these tax credits were funding but never received. So I think we need to look very carefully at continuing these because, once again, I always come back to this sort of idea of highest and best use. And even for this office, what is the highest and best use of the treasurer's office? It's not simply to behave like the IRS, send out the tax bills, collect the money, and then additionally conduct the property tax delinquency sale. There's nothing progressive about the core function of this office. And so that's where we should be looking and saying, hold on a second. What more can this office be doing while continuing to fulfill its core function? Can it shine a light on some of these programs that are funded by taxpayers who oftentimes don't have the time or the resources to sort through all of the different layers of where their money goes to see if it aligns with their priorities, and then take it a step further. Every single one of our tax dollars is only spent when it's allocated by a budget. And each of those budgets are voted on by someone elected to represent our interests. So you should very easily be able to see what you paid in taxes, what you received in every form. How much money went to your child's public school? Now, even if you don't have a child, the public school in that area is certainly going to impact the resale value of your home. How much money went to the police district that you live in? How much money went to the fire district that you live in? How much money went to the closest parks to your home? And then show us who represented you on those budget votes. So if your primary concern is public safety, and you look and say, well, hold on a second. Why did so much of my money not go to that when this is a big concern for me? Or you look at TIF spending and new TIFs that were authorized. Or you look at maybe a 6B property tax incentive for a commercial property, and you say, hold on a second, it was my alderman, or it was my Cook County commissioner who voted yes on this. It's far more powerful when you call up an elected official and say, excuse me, I paid this much to this, and you voted yes on that. I disagree with that budget vote because the money should be going to that. That's a very, very, very different thing to say to an elected official than by simply saying, my taxes are too high.
Yeah.
If you give them that direct request and you say, look, I want to make sure that you are putting more money into our schools and not into some of these incentive programs, or that the money is going to this and not that, and I will hold you accountable. I will vote against you. I will run against you. I will support someone against you. You are going to get their attention. And you should not have, most people cannot always attend community meetings or public budget hearings. Therefore, this information needs to be easily accessible and usefully transparent. To simply give someone a bunch of raw data and say, here, I'm transparent. No, that's not helpful. And the thing is, taxes are not inherently evil. Right. But waste, corruption, and vague information, that is. When you go to the grocery store and even if you have a huge bill, a whole cart full of groceries, you're not upset because you can look at that receipt and say, oh, okay, I spent a little bit more, it looks like the price of eggs went up. I can either buy different eggs or I can ask the store what happened, but at least I have the information I need to make the decision that's right for me. And when it comes to the treasurer's office, particularly as it applies to the assessor. So they are two separate offices, yet in my opinion, they are co-equal branches or co-equal offices, and they exist to check each other for the good of the taxpayers. As I mentioned, the treasurer's office is not the IRS, and it's not a post office either. It should not be blindly sending out whatever every single tax bill it receives. The treasurer's office should be reviewing tax bills which are driven by assessment values of properties for reasonableness. The same way that when you go to a restaurant, if you order a sandwich and the waiter brings you a bowl of soup, Well, even if the kitchen made the bowl of soup instead of the sandwich, where was the waiter on this? It was so blatantly wrong, it was nothing that you ordered. But maybe if there's just an ingredient off, okay, then that's a reasonable thing not to have noticed. But in some of these cases that have been noticed recently, where assessment values were so far from what they should have reasonably been, it's not the treasurer's job to redo all of the assessor's work, but it certainly is the treasurer's job to make sure that every property tax bill that goes out is within the bounds of reasonableness. Something that in audit we always call materiality. It's not perfection, but is it materially accurate? And that's what this office can and should be doing. And it hasn't. And that's really a shame, because we did have the recent reports from the Chicago Tribune and ProPublica. We shouldn't have to wait for don't get me wrong, I certainly respect the value of investigative journalism, but when we already have a taxpayer-funded office that's readily positioned to review tax bills for reasonableness, then that has been a waste of taxpayer dollars. Because, as I mentioned, there is a higher and better use for this office. And that's where there's been a missed opportunity. And it's one of the very first things I would do. It's the treasurer's name on tax bills. It's not the assessor. So every single bill that goes out should be within the bounds of reasonableness.
I like. So
thank you.
If we were to describe, I guess, the major duties of what the treasurer's office does, how would you describe the major duties of the treasurer for Cook County?
Sure. So those core duties are you send out the tax bills twice a year, so March 1st and then in August, and then you collect those taxes, and then you distribute them back down to the respective taxing districts based on where the property resides. One of the other functions of the treasurer's office is to conduct the annual property tax delinquency sale, and this is something with which I have a great deal, with which I take significant issue. So the property tax delinquency sale says that if a property is delinquent on its taxes by more than 12 months, then the treasurer will auction off that debt to a private collector. So right now, the treasurer is statutorily limited to a monthly interest rate of 1.5% on the delinquent amount. Once that tax debt is sold to a private collector, that can go up to 18%.
Wow.
So how in the world will someone who's already having a difficult time paying their taxes and then the 1.5% interest from the county, how in the world are you going to pay the debt plus an 18% interest rate? How in the world is that going to happen? And then after, I believe, 2.5 years, the collector can foreclose. And it is in many of those neighborhoods that are already experiencing an exodus from Cook County. And so one of the things that I would do is I would work closely with the Illinois General Assembly to abolish this property tax sale that does nothing to strengthen our communities, to help preserve the integrity of these properties once they go delinquent, and also as a measure, certainly not a silver bullet, but as a measure to help stem the exodus out of Cook County. Now, what would happen under my proposal is we would be shifting those delinquent properties under the Cook County Land Bank Authority, which is optimally positioned to cleanse those properties of their debt and then make sure that they are fit and ready to be sold to hopefully a new neighbor. Because we can't have it in those cases where you just have some private collector with zero attachment to the neighborhood or the community owning these properties and then simply foreclosing on them. And in many cases, it's just a beneficial tax write-off. If this is what you do for a living, great, you take the capital loss, and then that's going to help reduce your capital gains in other places on your return. So they have very little incentive for these properties or these neighborhoods to succeed. Now, this office is optimally positioned to tell a very different story, one that benefits the county and can benefit it. And we come back to highest and best use. What is the highest and best use for those taxpayer dollars that fund the operation of this office? And is it to allow these private collectors to come in and take these properties, or is it to make sure that these neighborhoods that in many cases are afflicted by this tax delinquency do not fall further behind? I'm not running to be the treasurer for the next 20 years. I'm running because there are opportunities to do things that will have a benefit beyond this office's traditional scope. And that's a wonderful, wonderful chance, and one that I feel I'm uniquely qualified for. And now is the time to do it. It's not a matter of waiting until the federal government's going to come in, because that's not going to happen. The state government's not going to do it, not until local leadership has prompted them to move in this direction and has let them know that this is a very important issue. So it's truly a fantastic opportunity, and this office is really in a special position to do some things that it has never done before, because it's never seen itself as more than it has currently been, which is send out the tax bills, collect the money, distribute it out, and conduct the property tax sale. That's not the sort of leadership that should be coming from an elected official. That's the kind of behavior I think you get from just someone who's hired to do a job. And if we're going to ask voters to do their homework and to make a decision, then it should be for something that is bold and can have an impact that has not been felt before, to move the needle in the right direction for the county where we all live. And so it really is a special opportunity, and one I'm really hoping to get. And that over the 4 years that I should be judged critically and thoughtfully off of the progress that I've made. And if I haven't done these things to the satisfaction of the voters, if I have not achieved the progress that I've set out to do, that I've laid forth in my platform, then I had better have a very, very, very good reason why, because the voters are owed at the absolute minimum that.
Yes. So we talked about voters, and we tend to leave the nonprofits out. You know, we think about the for-profits, the manufacturing companies, and, you know, all those entities that pay taxes. But why should nonprofits who don't pay taxes care about the work of the treasurer's office?
Sure. So I think that's a fantastic question. So the work within the treasurer's office, one of the biggest things I want to do, and I cannot solely take credit for this idea, City Treasurer Kurt Summers, he took $20 million of the city of Chicago's taxpayer dollars and deposited it within the last African-American owned bank in the city, ISF, Illinois Service Federal.
I had my first bank account there.
Oh, you did? Really?
Yes. Yeah, before I could even contribute myself, my parents, when I was born, they started an account there and contributed every year, and then it gave me the money, you know, after I graduated from college. I'm sorry.
You're kidding. No. What a small world. So, and that's where, and this kind of goes back even to the B Corp side, but for those nonprofits, particularly local community nonprofits, that are more likely to have a relationship with a smaller local community bank, with a local credit union, we should be depositing our taxpayer dollars there. Federally insured financial institutions, so those taxpayer dollars are never at risk, but within local institutions in areas of Cook County where it has traditionally been more difficult to attract private capital to support aspiring homeowners and small businesses, and in many cases the nonprofits who are drawn to those areas of greatest need. Mm-hmm. And so once again, there are many opportunities within this office, and this is another one where if we just put in a little bit of creativity and elbow grease, mm-hmm. we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can look, who are those thoughtful, progressive leaders who have taken steps already within Cook County? The Chicago City Treasurer did it, and if they can do it at the city level, there's no reason that we cannot do it within the nation's second largest county. And imagine the impact that would have if we could tell those banks, okay, we will be depositing this much with you, and we will be back to then distribute it out to the local taxing districts whose money this is. Mm-hmm. Imagine what they could do. They could do so much more for those local entities, what they could invest, what they could lend out. And that's the thing, and at no risk to taxpayers. So the Treasurer's Office is uniquely positioned to not only raise the standard for itself, but as the nation's second largest county, as one of the mm-hmm. Democratic Party's true strongholds nationwide, if we can take a number of these steps within Cook County for its 1.8 million properties, for its 5.25 million people, for its 945 square miles, imagine the example we can set for Phoenix, for Philadelphia, for Miami, for Minneapolis. We can then show them that, look, this is the way we should handle property tax delinquencies. This is how we should be depositing taxpayer dollars. This is how we should be disclosing information to taxpayers in a way that encourages civic engagement and hopefully higher voter turnout. There are so many things that this office can do beyond what it was created to do, and it has never gone beyond that. And that's what every single elected official owes every single voter, which is to do more than what your office was just created to do, to get more value out of the money and the resources that you are given to operate, not to set up some sort of political career, but to push yourself as hard and as fast as possible in the right direction in an exhaustive way. Because you're not supposed to be pacing yourself as an elected official. You're not supposed to be saying, okay, I can only do this, but only if you give me 3 terms. Absolutely not. You should be generating progress right away. This is not some sort of some sort of lifetime appointment where you're there to pace yourself. Absolutely not. This is elected office. You go in, you do as much as you can as quickly as possible, and when you are too tired or you become disinterested, it's time to step down. The pace should only get faster and faster, and I believe that's the case for every single elected official, certainly not just the Cook County Treasurer.
Okay, that's excellent. As you were talking, I thought about, different ways nonprofit organizations could, in fact, interface with your office. Those organizations that deal with, advocacy and civic engagement, obviously they could be excellent allies in helping to promote, change policies in Springfield, as well as provide information, to the community about your programs and services. Those organizations that with nonprofit, they would have some really creative ideas that help input, to provide input on economic development policy as it relates to the way the treasurer would invest, and then financial literacy programs. So I see a huge opportunity for nonprofits to actually operate in a space that they probably hadn't thought of, operating in before. So, I really thank you for that response.
That's a fantastic. I'm writing this down right now. No, that's a fantastic idea. I agree with you.
All right, great. So I want to remind our listening audience that you can call in right now. Our number is 347-884-8121. Again, that number is 347-884-8121. I realize that this is President's Day and you guys might be celebrating in other ways, but if you have missed our live podcast, as you listen to this recording, I'm sure you are, as I am, learning a lot. I'm going to check our chat room and see if we have any folks in the chat room. And at this point, again, it's a holiday, so we didn't expect to get a whole lot of people today. But the wonderful thing is we'll have a great recording, and I'm going to share this in my network. I think that folks in nonprofit really need to think about how they can operate in a space where they're providing advocacy for change policies in the Cook County Treasurer's Office that will actually benefit economic development as well as home ownership and, maintaining those homes in distressed communities and even, those communities that are stable.
I agree. Absolutely.
All righty. So another function of the Treasurer's Office is to set investment policy for revenues that are collected through taxes and other strategies. Investment policy to jumpstart economic development in historically marginalized communities. And I think you touched on a couple of those strategies.
Sure. So one of the things with the Treasurer's Office, with those tax dollars that are collected, they then have to be remitted down to the local taxing districts shortly after they're collected. So it would be a short-term deposit with one of those strategically chosen local community banks or credit unions. However, the Treasurer's Office itself brings in about $11.8 million a year in commercial user fees, which is the primary funding source of its office's operations. So I would propose in those cases that we are able to amplify the impact of those deposits while once again never risking that money, because even though that money is generated by the operations of the Treasurer's Office, every single dollar that comes in the door belongs to the taxpayers and should be allocated at the discretion of the Cook County Board of Commissioners to once again meet the highest and best use of the county's priorities. So in those situations, I think about something like when the soda tax was repealed last December. In that case, none of those commercial user fees, totaling over $11 million at the time, was offered back to the Cook County Board. And this is not some magic trick that the Treasurer's Office has come up with. This is simply one of the ways that it generates funds due to the function it provides, due to the operations of its office. And so the Cook County State's Attorney, the Cook County Assessor, the Cook County Sheriff, the Cook County Clerk, the Cook County Recorder of Deeds, they don't have that stream of funding, not because they don't know how or they're not creative. It's just not something that their office is set up to do. And therefore, I would make sure that every single one of those dollars comes back to the Cook County Board of Commissioners. So that way when they say, you know what, yes, we want to make sure the Treasurer's Office can operate. However, the highest and best use for those funds is going to be focusing on public safety and public health. Yes, we need to make sure that we can send out tax bills and collect property taxes, but with every with all of the critical services that are provided by Cook County, let's make sure that we don't have any departments hoarding cash when there is a greater need. And so with that, the funds that the office has, to the extent that we can look at longer-term investments, impact investments that would not put taxpayer dollars at risk, I would certainly want to do that. In those cases where we want to make sure we always maintain our liquidity and that we never ever risk a taxpayer dollar when it comes to when it comes to an investment, I would want to make sure in those cases that we keep them in a bank, and particularly a local community bank that has remained committed to the county and to those areas where it has been harder to attract private capital and growth.
Okay, great. And along that vein, we're running out of time, and I have about 4 more questions that I think are equally as important as the first questions. Do you have a little bit of time beyond 3 o'clock?
Sure.
All the questions.
I'm more than happy to speak.
Okay, yeah, I'm really enjoying the conversation. Normally I would, wind down.
Likewise. Yeah, thank you, Valerie. I'm having a great time too. Thank you.
Okay, yes. So along those lines, do you see any opportunities to leverage, I guess, your influence with other banking institutions to increase their investments in marginalized communities?
Absolutely. So I think that's where, if we highlight where we are depositing these funds, and this would also be something that I would be more than comfortable disclosing on people's tax bills, so they can see how their money is generating the greatest impact possible. So they can see, okay, how much is going to my child's school, how much is going to this, and where was my money kept? And we can list those financial institutions, and so they can say, oh, you know what, I'm glad to see that it was supporting whichever bank or credit union it was. And you know what, maybe I'll do that as well. I'm for my business and for me personally, I use just a local community bank that's down the street. And it's to the point now where most of these financial institutions, a number of years ago, they didn't have robust online access or a mobile app. Everyone has it now. So the playing field is far more level. And so how can we then shine a brighter light on those smaller and more local financial institutions that tend to be more supportive of aspiring homeowners and small businesses? So I would do anything else I could to encourage them to invest, and that would be one of the ways in which we would judge where to invest the county's money. I mean, it would be impossible to spread it around to every single local bank there is. So when choosing them, we would want to make sure that they have a proven track record of supporting those vulnerable communities. So we know that when we deposit taxpayer dollars there, there's already a program and a history in place of using that money for a greater good.
Yeah, I think from an operational standpoint, when you issue RFPs for, say, investment managers or other folks who are you're going to deposit your funds with, maybe some sort of scorecard. I think that's probably what you were getting at, some sort of scorecard to look at their CRA or community reinvestment compliance, or either, giving people bonus points, so to speak, for those organizations or those institutions that have demonstrated in their investment in marginalized communities. So you're not necessarily punishing folks, but you are definitely incentivizing those good actors. That's just a thought.
Absolutely, and you make a good point. We're not punishing those. We're certainly not out to punish anyone. we're trying to make sure that exactly for those good actors that we are supporting them, but also that we are shining a light on the impact of these local financial institutions.
Yeah.
What I would love is to see that people then decide to take some of their business to some of these local institutions to then amplify the impact. So it's not just their tax dollars that are being deposited, it's their personal dollars as well, or maybe their business's dollars. And then by publicly disclosing the method by which we chose which financial institutions in which to deposit, that they would then be able to help make a more informed decision themselves and think, okay, you know what, maybe this is right for me, or maybe I will apply similar criteria when deciding where to bank.
Yeah, and I really like that idea because I think it has a multiplier effect. Not only would the Treasurer's Office be investing in community banks or, those institutions that are investing in communities, but you're also encouraging the businesses to leverage that investment, businesses and individuals who receive their taxes. So I think that's very powerful.
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, so I know we get confused from time to time when it comes to the various responsibilities of the Cook County Treasurer's Office and the Comptroller's Office. In fact, we don't really hear much about what the Comptroller does. I had to do a search myself, so just so I could get a sense for what it is the Comptroller does. So, for our listening audience, can you share some of the differences, key differences between those two offices, the Cook County Treasurer's Office, for which you're a candidate, and the Comptroller's Office, and I don't believe that's an elected office.
Correct. So the Cook County Comptroller, in many ways, acts as the county's accountant. So it maintains the financial records, handles the reporting duties, the payables, payroll, things like that. So it really sort of behaves like the county's finance department, whereas the treasurer's job is to handle the collections of tax revenue and then distributing that down to the local taxing districts. And then, as I mentioned, in addition, conducting the property tax sale. So, yes, the comptroller is not an elected position, whereas it is at the state level. And that's, and so as not an elected position, the comptroller is, its responsibilities are very clear, whereas the treasurer, although the responsibilities are laid out as an elected official, it certainly has far more latitude to advance those principles under which the elected official was elected, and in most cases, obviously, this being Cook County, it is a democratically elected official who thus should then be advancing progressive ideals. But yes, in that case, so the county comptroller is in many ways the finance department for the county.
So as you were talking, I guess I summarized it in my mind, and you can tell me, you're a CPA, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me like
Valerie? Hello? Hi, Valerie? I think we were disconnected. Hi, Valerie? Hello?
What a matchup!
And what a team, Mike. Metro PCS and the iPhone SE for $0 on a network that covers 99% of people in the U.S. Oh, impressive.
Play with the best. Switch to Metro PCS and an unlimited LTE plan and get a 32-gig iPhone SE for $0. Metro PCS. Coverage not available in some areas, plus sales tax. Claim based on talk and text. Not valid for active numbers currently on the T-Mobile network or active on Metro PCS in the past 90 days. See store for details and terms and conditions. What a matchup!
And what a team, Mike. Metro PCS and the iPhone SE for $0 on a network that covers 99% of people in the U.S. Oh, impressive.
Play with the best. Switch to Metro PCS and an unlimited LTE plan and get a 32-gig iPhone SE for $0. Metro PCS. Coverage not available in some areas, plus sales tax. Claim based on talk and text. Not valid for active numbers currently on the T-Mobile network or active on Metro PCS in the past 90 days. See store for details and terms and conditions.